Now, you can't help but be inspired by this. But I want to ask you a little political question here.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go into the politics of it, but we have a ruling party that believes in an economic blueprint that was created in the Soviet Union in 1950, specifically for African countries that were getting liberated. And that seems like a million miles away from what you were telling us right now, i.e. the National Health, National Democratic Revolution. Sorry. So are people on the ground, the people that you're engaging with, are they showing their disapproval of perhaps the way the world's run by just not voting, not caring?
So I think that, I started off as one of those socialist revolutionaries, and I believed I was. I think that there's a very big difference between what people, kind of the political guys espouse and what is actually real for the people on the ground. And I don't believe that. I believe that South Africans are, first of all, not just workers. They actually love the concept of entrepreneurship and hustling and so on and so forth. And in a sense, they've been forced into it because they grew up being told that, the only jobs out there was a South African breweries rep, or a nurse or a teacher, or and so on, or a blue collar, Pavutaga worker. And what's happened, because there are no jobs, people have been forced into this informal economy that I'm talking about. And as they've been forced into it, have actually relished it and become very successful of it. And I don't believe that the ANC in any way reflects any of their aspirations towards any form of socialist, that people are at heart very strongly capitalist. And that is a politically led thing, and it has no reference. And I don't believe the ANC is particularly in touch with people on the ground. And when they are in touch with people on the ground, it's about how do you get control? Come and cut the ribbon. And if people do it for themselves, and to a large extent, people have turned their back on that, and they've just said, well, we're not going to get help from the government, so we're going to do it ourselves, and are doing it for themselves.
I was very involved in the horse racing industry for quite a long time. We even bred horses, and I know you're close to horses as well, but not the racing side. But the saying in the racing industry is that if you've got a good trainer, he will make sure that the horse wins as many races as it should.
Yeah.
If you've got a bad trainer, it might never win a race. And it's a little bit like perhaps where we're going right now.
Yeah.
If we had a good trainer on the economy, if we had a different approach towards the whole economy, and especially what you had told us about informal, what kind of potential, what kind of inherent human ingenuity could we unlock in this country?
To a large extent, I think they should be left alone. But I believe so. So I believe that the opportunity lies in a hybrid formalization of these businesses. And what I mean by hybrid formalization is that what are the things that make them successful and enable that? And you can see the city, for instance, of Cape Town is looking at backrooms really seriously and changing their bylaws to recognize micro developers, as they call them, and the ability to fix a housing crisis by allowing people to do it themselves. And so, so which part is informal and which part is informal? Yes, you've got to get plans for your building, but you can't build closer to your neighbor's wall than you would be in Constantia, and so on and so forth. So that's a kind of hybrid thing around it. The only thing that's going to release the informal sector to its real potential is going to be about how does the private sector not only engage, how do they finance these sectors, enable people like NW Singh to get a loan to build more backrooms instead of buying a Mercedes, and so on and so forth. So, the government needs to step out of that space. They need to liberalize it just as much as we talk about in the private sector, to talk about stop having these laws, whether they BEE laws or whatever it might be that's restricting business from being more successful. The same needs to happen in the space. Get out of the space and enable it that people can actually get on with it.
But if you go the other way around, because the government is so inefficient and incompetent, which we know, isn't that also being a bit of a positive factor for the sector? They're not being looked at. They're not being taxed. They can get on with life. And is that not something that might be at risk if you have a more efficient government?
No, because they still have restrictions. I mean, as an example, it takes 40 days to register business in South Africa, 4 days to register business in Rwanda. If you want to register your business for CIPC and to pay tax and whatever it might be, you need to get a proof of residence. If I get one in a township, a utility bill, you got pay as you go, and. I mean, try and work that out. And you find that this sector, for instance, is paying 15% VAT and not claiming it, whereas most businesses would be claiming 15%. So that's a net benefit to the fiscus. And what would your tax be? Fairly close to that. So, people are paying taxes and they'd be able to claim taxes and so on and so forth. So, to an extent, that's true, but I don't think entirely, because you have to balance it off with what are the drag factors, as much as you're saying that they also stimulate.
And then you could also get the next Elon Musk coming out of a sector like that. We see so many examples of people like he was. I mean, he bunked down with his long-distant relatives in Canada to start off with, worked his way through college and revolutionized 3 industries. So who's to say that couldn't happen next if you just got a little bit less obstacles? But you often quote Factfulness, and what a wonderful book. Where's South Africa if you say we're 30 years, Sweden was 30 years ago from the IKEA sector, but where do you see South Africa if in terms of that book relative to maybe some successful economies?
Sure. I couldn't.
How many years behind?
Yeah. So, look, I think that one of the things that we're not doing is we're not measuring this economy. And as much as we miscalculate, we need to change how we measure what unemployment is, or what real unemployment is, and its lack of also includes lack of an income. If I'm an unemployed person sitting at home, but I'm renting out 3 back rooms and earning 15,000 Rand a month from that, and someone comes and asks me, I'll say I'm unemployed, and I'm unemployed. But we never ask the next question: do you have any other form of income?
Talk about a back room, because I'm sure people here are thinking, oh, it's like a kaya. Just explain what a back room is, what that business is.
Yeah. So, kind of started, I guess, as kind of like a kaya. But if you look at most of the back rooms in a township today, the vast proportion of them, are really nice. And I've got pictures which Alec wouldn't let me put up. But of these extraordinary back rooms, which are like a 3 by 3 meter room, so it's not huge, but go to Sweden, it's a lot smaller, or 6 by 3 meter, which is called E-flat. And these are in essence little flats with a little kitchen, little kitchenette area, and often Wi-Fi connected. The penetration of Wi-Fi and connectivity in the township is just quite extraordinary. I was in Gugulethu a while ago, and there's a Gogo who's got 6 of these units, and they've all got a little shower connected to it, and a little kitchenette, and of course, she shows us around these rooms, and there's 3, and then 3 on top of them, and they're basically built on the back of the township properties, and there's generally enough space, funnily enough, in these old 4-room premises to build these back rooms. And this Gogo took us around, and she was showing us in Gugulethu, and she stopped and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I never gave you my Wi-Fi password." And I wasn't sure if she was bragging or she meant it, but so I think, that they're not what people think about. And the interesting part about it is that the fast food sector, which is everything from what they call chicken dust to amagoda, to amabledi, and a range of different meals, are generally more expensive than a McDonald's and stuff. It's not, people aren't buying them because it's cheaper. They're buying them because they prefer that food. But the fast food sector, which is 100% South African, I said, the spaza sector is very much immigrant, is just South Africans, and there's a 90 billion rand a year sector, and it's growing rapidly. And why is it growing rapidly? Eskom, thank you, Eskom, they say all the time. And number two is that these backroomers don't want to cook in their back rooms, and so this growth of this casual dining is in essence what Nando's developed, going to sit at and having your takeaway at some, it's just accelerated this sector. So, but going back to your thing around the economy, they Nigeria changed how they measured their economy, and suddenly they were 20% bigger or something like that. I believe the same in terms of South Africa, because how should we measure ourselves? Should we measure ourselves on the basis of the formal economy only and ignore this massive sector? And if we started incorporating this economy, and if you look at worldwide, what are economies? The gig economy, Airbnb, and so on, are massive. Are they measured? And we in essence can measure those because they're on apps and so on and so forth. But when you take into account the IT or gig economies in a place like America, it's 10-20% of the economy, certainly in terms of turnover and investment and so on. And so you're measuring at that, you're saying, wow, look how big we are, but we're not measuring ours because it's just like the gig economy. Just because it's a nerd sitting behind a counter in a room in Atlanta, it's no different from Dabi Singh with her back room. It's invisible, but it's there. And why aren't we measuring it? And when we measured that, I reckon we'll pop up somewhere quite impressive in terms of comparative economies.
And we wouldn't get so depressed. If you look at the latest Reserve Bank figures, you want to slit your wrists. 0.6% growth this year, 1% next year. So you think, oh hell, what's the point? But then you go and talk to someone like Dylan, and he's gonna say, well, South African shares are cheap. Well, how can they be cheap if you're growing at less than your population growth rate? But actually, you're measuring the wrong damn thing. So if you brought in the Kasi economy, do you have any gut feel of what's really happening in South Africa's economic growth?
So, just the numbers that I mentioned are around about, you're talking, and these aren't all my figures, you're talking around 500 billion rand conservatively, and I'm not measuring many of the other sectors, the building sector as an example. So you're talking 500 billion rand a year turnover just in Spaza's fast food, hair, and the Muti sector, herbal and traditional medicine. I wrote about it in Kasinomics. I was like, it's worth 3 billion rand a year. Everyone read it and were like, how could this is rubbish, this can't be true. And then in 2018, a bunch of universities in South Africa did the same research into Muti sector, and they came up and said it's worth 18 billion rand a year, which is a lot more than I'd said it was. So, so there's a lot of these. And of course, one must understand that these aren't just people buying something for 5 rand and selling it for 5 rand, buying it for 5 rand and selling it for 10 rand. So there's a real markup and stuff happening in that. So there's real value creation. But I also think that, from like this, your audience and stuff like that, is like we'd look differently at many of the businesses that are being successful in this sector. And say or the people who should be successful in the sector, why aren't you getting more involved in that sector?